somebody has to start thinking here.
I think there's a lot of people thinking, but I also think there's a lot of people fighting and feeling hopeless, and people that watch the system being misused and really being taken down by speculation. I am going to do an entire show on credit default swaps and other methods of securitization to explain how it all works to the public. And if you remember on the show with Ellen, I had asked her if she could explain a credit default swap. And you really have to be in it to fully explain it. People can explain it on a basic level, but I think that securitization is worth an entire show, because some feel that the securitization of capital has sent really weapons of mass destruction into the economy and destroyed our economy from the inside. And the fact is that the securitization of money is still happening. It's still going on. It hasn't been outlawed. And so I think if you don't have a parallel something going on legally about that stopping, I think you're still going to have in the overall economy, you're still going to have this detrimental thing going on that works at cross purposes to anything that's of good. But that's my take on it. Question about in the interview that we all did with Ellen Brown and the conversation that we had, I had heard you say something that was very compelling to me, and I want to ask you about it again and spend some time on it. And I'm going to paraphrase it, but I think you'll remember the subject. It had to do with the GDP. You said that the way the GDP has been designed, they're missing elements in what the GDP really is. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Can you explain, first of all, the GDP to people, and then the way it's currently being comprised, and then what you said that's different about it, that it's really off? Why is it off? What is it? How does it work? How do people think it really operates? And where is it off from your view?
You see, the gross domestic product, the GDP, is considered the yardstick by which to measure all goods and services that a nation produce over a 1 year period. And the problem with that is that anything you produce, they are considered as a service or a product. Let's say you drive a car, you run into an accident, and you take to the repair shop and they fix it. It costs $2,000. It is considered as value added. It increased the GDP. Whereas nothing was created, nothing was done. Actually, you lost on value of your car for whatever amount it is, because it was in an accident. Now, if you go, it is just like this. If you have let's say you have $1,000 in your checkbook, and you spend $500 of that check of that amount for repairing your car, and instead of deducting from that $1,000, you add $500 to it. Now you think you have $1,500, and you think you have a growth, and if you think that really you have that amount in your account and you go and spend it, you're in big trouble. Now this is the problem with GDP. They do it this way. All the social costs, healthcare is a social cost, repair costs are social costs. They even do not consider energy and so on as a cost. They think as a value added. When they go and exploit oil and everything else, that goes as a value added into the GDP and increase the GDP, whereas they are depleting the resources of this planet. Now, if they use solar energy, it's a different story, but they don't do it. So here they add all the social costs, like attorney costs is a social cost, crime costs, if they build jails and so on and so forth, that adds to the GDP. If they have the health cost I mentioned, environmental cost is a social cost. They add everything to that, and then they think, oh, we have 5% economic growth, and then they go on binge of spending that kind of money. Okay, for a time you can do it, but over time you run into difficulty. It will become like you have only $500 in your account, but you think you have $1,500 instead of deducting $500 from your $1,000 initial amount which you have in your account. So that is exactly what we are running into it.
So is it the criteria underlying GDP that's toxic, that's ineffective, and that's false, that is creating a false sense of what is?
Yes, and this is wrong. This is just as I mentioned about that $1,000 deal, that is just the same way. The environmental cost, like if they spent $50,000 to clean up a river, what did it add to the value of that society? The river should never get dirty. And if you destroyed it, somebody has done that. So you have to, I'm not saying it will never get if you manufacture. Only way you can not cause environmental problem if there is no activity, economically or otherwise. Then you cannot. But if you, and still there will be some damages because there could be hurricane, there could be anything else, earthquake, and it can destroy a lot of things. But assuming you have, the river gets dirty, the ocean gets dirty, you deplete these things, so you have to deduct from that equation. Then you get to the real picture, whether you have any growth or not. And they do not do that, and they think they have economic growth. And I have never seen when there was any kind of economic growth that somebody knocked at my door and said, okay, we got 5% economic growth, that's why you get $5 to go and buy a hamburger today. It never happened, and I am sure it never happened to anybody else. Now, what I say and I propose is the Economic Security Index.
Oh, that's what I was just going to ask you about next. Talk about the Economic Security Index as indicators of economic well-being, please.
Yeah,
And ladies and gentlemen, we are interviewing Farid Khavari, Dr. Khavari, who is a gubernatorial candidate in the state of Florida, the author of Towards a Zero-Cost Economy and Environomics. Go ahead, Dr. Khavari.
Yes. Now, we must be able to measure economic success in tangible terms, that we see what really changed after we have done all these damages to the environment and to the economy and everything else, whether we gain anything or not. With calculating GDP, you will never get that real picture. So what I'm saying is this. We have to create a system that we compare number of households that purchase a home or condominium compared to the year before. Number of people who paid off or lowered their mortgages compared to the previous year. Number of people who had healthcare coverage compared to the previous year. Number of people who became healthier or sicker compared to the previous year. And everything else, how many students got their PhD or bachelor or master degree this year compared to last year.
How do you see compiling that, since you would need a centralized tracking system, almost a census-like function, to get that kind of information, to compile it? How do you see it being compiled?
It's very easy. You have to have an institute and collect these numbers from the universities, from the banks, and the state bank will be glad to do that because they have a control of that regarding the housing and education and everything else. And then just like we collect information and data for everything else. And this is not going to be a difficult job. We will find out how many people owned houses this year compared to last year.
But your basic strategy on this is you're comparing apples to apples is the point.
Apple to apples. And then we have to deduct also from the total profit we make, let's say in the Bank of the State of Florida, let's say we are talking about Florida, we must also deduct the social cost, which is costing us. And that is when we have to build jails. That is when we are having police on the street. An ideal society would be that we have no jails, no police, no kind of anything, even no court and no legal system.